Of course, it all lines up, and it's all good. I always tell them that when I was a young boy, I was looking outside of the window, and then I got told off in school because I had to pay attention to what was on the whiteboard. Now I get paid to look outside of the window. So this is the center part of the bridge. This is where the steering wheel is. And we have two workstations, so one to the left and one to the right of the helmsman, as that is where the navigator and the co-navigator work. So the complement on the bridge at any given time when we're sailing is two watch officers, navigator, co-navigator, and we have two helmsmen. Both of them, if we're in autopilot, are lookouts, and as soon as we go to hand steering, so that is in the difficult passages, or also going in and out of port, then we go to hand steering, so then one is hand steering and one is lookout. And they switch every half hour, so that the person hand steering is, of course, very focused on the task, so that he is doing it for half an hour. If you do that for 4 or 5 hours, it's too long. You get, your attention span goes down. So you do it for half an hour, and then they switch. And I said navigator, co-navigator. You might have heard, it looks or it sounds very similar to pilot and co-pilot in the airline industry. And that's also where we kind of took it from. Navigator, co-navigator. So that there's always two people on the bridge making the decision, so it's never a single point of failure. Obviously one of the two is with the charge, so actually is the actual one that makes the final decision. And that is usually, of course, the most senior officer of the two. So he has or she has the charge at that time. If there is a disagreement and they can't come to a solution where they both are happy with, then they will call one of the senior officers, so that's either the staff captain or myself, and then we'll come up, and then of course a decision will be made, because now we have 3 people. And they have their workstations, each to the side of the helmsman. Then for the navigator, that person also has the controls for the main engines next to him, or her. So the navigator will control the propulsion, obviously in discussion with the co-navigator. So you see the different handles that we have. We have 2 that can rotate 360 degrees. So that is for our main engines of the ship, the propulsion units. And those units are called azipods. So it's a unit where you have a rudder combined with the motor, combined and attached to it is the propeller, and that is all into one unit, and that can rotate 360 degrees. So we have 2 of these units in the back end of the ship, in the stern, and we can rotate them 360 degrees when the speed is lower than 5 or 6 knots. So when we're going into port, our speed comes down, and then we can start rotating them. We can go into the maneuvering mode. So with these, we can move the ship sideways, because we can put our main propeller of the ship in a 90-degree angle, and then it pushes the ship sideways. And we have 2 of them. So the total power we have then is 20 megawatts, as one of these units is 10 megawatts. So that is close to 13,000 horsepower. So that's how we control the stern going into port. To control the bow, we have bow thrusters, obviously located in the front end of the ship. And you can see them, if you walk on the dock, you will see 3 circles with a cross in it. And right below the waterline, that's where the bow thrusters are. It's a tunnel that goes underwater from left to right. Propeller right in the middle. And again, when the speeds are low, about 5 to 6 knots, then we can operate it with the handle that's just above the 2 that you see that can rotate. And with that, moving it to the left, the bow will go to the left, or moving it to the right, the bow will go to the right. So now, on the lower speeds, we can maneuver the ship, we can go sideways, and we can also rotate, because we can move one end of the ship to the left and the other end to the right, and then we rotate 360 degrees. So that's what we have been doing in the various ports when we come in and we need to rotate to go out. So that is how we maneuver the ship going in and out of port. When we go at sea, when we're sailing, then we use the handles or the telegraphs that are next to the 2 that are rotating, so on either side there's one. And those are, again, to control the azipods, but it's to control the revolutions. So 0 is 0 revolutions, and the further up you go, the faster the ship will go. And number 10 is maximum speed, 22 knots. If you go into the negative, minus 10, then of course you have maximum revolutions in reverse, and we start sailing in reverse, or we brake if we are sailing ahead. So that is what we use when we're at sea. At that time, the azipods can only go 35 degrees maximum to either side. And that can be done by either using the autopilot that controls them or by the steering wheel when you have a helmsman. So then, like today, we're out in the open ocean, we're sailing on autopilot. So that both of the helmsmen have a brake and they are the lookouts. Tomorrow morning, when we start sailing and going into Sitka, then one of the helmsmen will go behind the wheel and will start steering the ship by the orders given, at that time either the navigator or the pilot. Everything else you see is all buttons and dials that will just indicate the amount of power that is used, the amount of revolutions that are there, and of course the buttons to switch between the different modes for sailing. As I said, we have a helmsman also at the wheel when we're going in and out of port, so he's steering, and the person has two compasses right in front of him. So we have two gyro compasses, they're electrically driven, and they point to the north, so then we have, of course, 360 degrees that we can steer the various courses to go from A to B. We also have a magnetic compass, and that is up all the way forward on the top deck outside, because the magnetic compass always works because it's with the magnetic field of the Earth. Electrical gyro compasses can fail. We do have two, so that of course if one fails, at least we get an alarm, because the two of them are constantly comparing each other. And the both of them are comparing also with the magnetic compass to of course see if both are still working good. Besides the head wheel, we also have the tillers with which we can operate and steer the ship, so that's a backup system. And if these systems wouldn't work, we can go into the steering gear room, which is all the way on A deck aft, and then we can operate the steering from there. So then the commands will be given from the bridge to the steering gear room, which heading or which rudder angle we want, and then it will be followed up right there. As I said, we have an operating unit, which is for the navigator or the co-navigator, and we have actually 4 of these units. So there's one for the navigator, one for the co-navigator, one for the pilot, when we have a pilot on board, and one is for, as we call it, the operations director. When we're going into port, we start adding team members into the team up on the bridge. You get a pilot on board, staff captain will be added to the team, myself, captain, we will be added to the team. And that is also that the workload gets divided, because obviously going into port, workload goes up, so we can divide the workload amongst each other. And also the experience level on the team goes up, so it's better to go safely into port. The operations director has its own unit and is usually sitting behind the whole team. So the navigator, co-navigator, pilot are all in the front, operations director is sitting in the back. So that person can really see if nothing is missed by the team, if the team is executing the plan as what was discussed and planned for, and if the workload of one person is not getting too much, so that we reassign the tasks. So that is the operations director function. And we all have a radar. Radar is up in the radar mast, and there's the scanners, they scan around, and they detect anything that's around us. So that would be buoys, there's land and islands, and it's also ships. So they all get indicated on a radar display. Nowadays, radars come with a chart overlay function. As you can see on this picture, you only see the chart that is on. So the radar picture goes on top. So it overlays each other, so you can see exactly that the quayside or the land is all matching up, that you see that there is an island, you see there's a buoy, and you see dots on your radar screen that is not marked in the chart. Usually they're ships, because that is something that is not charted, because ships are sailing. So the other ships, you can plot them, so that means you acquire them as a target, and then it starts calculating what speed they're doing, what heading they're sailing on. We know our course and speed, so then we can see is there a risk of collision. That the two ships are getting with a CPA, closest point of approach of 0, because then it means a collision. Or if it's just not enough, it's just very small, then we're still passing too close. So if there is a risk of collision, then the rules of the road come into play, and either us or the other ship, or even both ships, have to avoid action, or they have to do action to avoid that collision. So that is what the radar is primarily used for, is to avoid collisions with other ships. And at the same time, it can also be used for positioning, because you do have the radar overlay on your chart, so you can see if you're still in the right position compared to the land around you, if you're still in safe water. So we have 4 of these units. Then we have the official electronic chart display information system. That's the ACDIS. We used to have paper charts that we navigate on, but nowadays all the paper charts are gone. We only have a computer screen up on the bridge. And we have 3 of these. One is in use by the navigation officers that are navigating the ship, so they can see 24/7 where the ship is located on the chart. It is coupled to the GPS, same as in your car, so you constantly have your position on the chart, which is a lot better than we have the paper chart, because then by the time you put the position in the chart, usually that was the time when you took the position. So if it was a star site or a sun site, that was about 15 minutes ago if you were good in your calculations, but you don't know where you are now exactly. You only know where you were 15 minutes ago. So with this you have a 24/7 with the GPS coupled to it. We have a second unit that is on the bridge, because that is the backup unit, and we have a third unit that is used by the voyage planning officer, because the navigation officers are using it to navigate where we are right now. The voyage planning officer is using it to plan the voyages that are coming up. So at the present moment we're planning the Caribbean cruises for January, February and March. So they are all planned and ready to go by the time we actually get to that date, that the whole voyage plan is ready to be executed. So that is the electronic chart display. One of the big advantages is also that our updates, they come in every week. They used to be made every week by the hydrographic office, but it was printed in a booklet. The booklet was then sent to the agent, and then the agent would bring it on board. So if you were on an ocean crossing, sometimes you got 5 or 6 booklets in one time that you came into port, because it took so long before they're actually reaching the agent, and by the time we reached that port to get it, of course, on board of the ship. So your updated charts were 6, 7, sometimes 2, 3 months old. Now with this, it's every week you get the information in on the internet. It's on a little stick, you plug it in, and the chart is updated. Then we have the bridge wings. So all the controls we have in the center of the ship, we also have on the bridge wing. So from here we can control our azipods, we can do the steering, we have our bow thrusters, we have one of the chart and radar displays on the wing. So the full control of the ship, we can switch it over to the bridge wing and operate the ship from there when we're going into port. We have one on the port side, that's this one, and we have one on the other side, the starboard side. And that is of course a mirrored image of it, because it's on the other side of the ship. Exactly the same. We have also the safety center or command and control center. When we have incidents happening on board of the ship, then this will be activated. In your cabin, you've probably seen already, you have a smoke detector, you have a sprinkler also in your cabin. So if any of those get activated, it gives an alarm up on the bridge, because this is located on the bridge. So then we can immediately see where it is. We can take immediate action by, of course, locating it, and then sending first response teams over there to deal with it, and even if we need to, of course, increase the incident response to whatever that we need to deal with that incident. On the bridge we can also close watertight doors, we can close the fire screen doors so that you can box this incident into a small compartment. We can switch off ventilation so that no fresh oxygen gets supplied into it, and also the smoke gets extracted to where we want it to go. And we can close fire dampers. We can also see the stability of the ship, so we can calculate it from here, which we do every time, because we're using fuel, so we need to put water back into the ship again in ballast tanks to, of course, stay at a certain draft to stay stable. But then, if we start using water to extinguish the fire, with the fire hoses that you see everywhere, that is seawater. So we pump it in from outside, use it to extinguish the fire, but you can only pump so much water in the ship. So at some point you need to stop, or you need to start pumping it out. And with the stability computer we can see exactly how much that point, or where that point is going to be reached, and we start pumping it outside again. We have a telegraph on the bridge, an old one, that is still working, it still rings. but it's not connected to anything. So you can ring it all you want, but you don't get any more speed or it doesn't stop the ship. This one was used for the christening of the ship in 2010. The ship was christened in Venice, and that was done by, at that time it was Princess Maxima, and it's now Queen Maxima of the Netherlands. So that is still up on the bridge, and also with a picture of the event when that was happening in 2010. This is the Azipod. So this is what actually propels the ship. It's hanging at the back end of the ship. It's all painted red, so that it's underwater. It's an anti-fouling paint. So the draft of the ship is 26 feet, so that's about 8 meters. The diameter of the propeller is about 16 feet, about 5.5 meters. On the picture, just below the propeller, you see a gentleman standing there, and you can't reach it to touch it, so that just gives you a bit of dimensions on how big that propeller is, and how big the Azipod is. If you want, you can go inside the Azipod. You can climb down, and you can go under the propeller shaft and come up again, if you're not claustrophobic. So here you can really see that it is a rudder. It has an engine, because that's kind of like the tube that you see, that is the electromotor, and it has the propeller right in front. It's a lot more efficient than the old engine, propeller shaft going out to the ship, and then you had the propeller, and then you had the rudder behind it. Because then the propeller shaft is a lot longer, because it need to reach from inside the ship to go out, and of course to get into the towards where the rudder is, and then it gets deep enough that the propeller can be there. So then every bearing or every support that you have reduces power of your main engine, because there's a power reduction. Also, to support the propeller when it's outside of the ship, there's often a frame welded, where of course another bearing is, and then you get the propeller. So now the flow of the water to the propeller is disturbed because there's a frame right in front of it. So with this system, there's free flow of water to the propeller because there's no frame in front. There's only 2 bearings because that's to support the motor itself, the engine, or the electromotor. So there's less power reduction, so it means more efficient. If you would have the same ships, same hull, same propeller, or in this case one ship with a Azipod and another ship with the conventional way, with a propeller and a rudder, and you put the same power on, the podded ship will go faster because it's more efficient. That power is immediately on the propeller. So that means if you have to run the same speed, the podded ship will use less fuel. So it's more fuel economic to run with propellers or with Azipods. Now the big advantages of this is that the power in the stern of the ship is now so much and so big, with the main propeller acting as a stern thruster, that there's less times where you would need a tugboat in port, so it saves you cost on that end as well. And these are the stabilizers. So this is sticking out of the ship. It's about 20 feet by 6 feet. We have 2, so there's one on the port, left, one on the starboard or right hand side of the ship. They are, as you can see, almost at the bottom of the ship, so about 8 meters on the water. And they are located right below the scenic elevators. And the elevator sets where you can look outside, right underneath, that's where one of these is located. As I said, we have 2, so one on either side. So when the ship is rolling, when it wants to go from one side to the other, then there's a measuring tool, that is a gyroscope, that measures how fast the ship wants to roll from port to starboard. That controls then via a computer a hydraulic unit, and that hydraulic unit controls these fins, so then one will go up, so that will create a lift, and the other one will go down, and that creates a drag, so that brings the ship back up right. These stabilizers, we have to retract them when we go into port, because if we go alongside, this will prevent you from going alongside, so you pull them in. That's why you see also there's a slot where they fit into, so that they fit into the hull. So they don't get damaged. And then when we're going out of the port and when we're in the open ocean, then we can switch them on, we can pump them out, and then they start operating, they start fitting. And then we go into the control room. This is the ECR, or the engine control room. So this is where we have the engineers operate everything that is in the technical spaces on board. The engine room is from the back end of the ship all the way to the front, so it's just about the length of the ship on the lowest deck. And all the machinery, so the main engines that we have, our diesel generator sets, the switchboards, our water makers, our heating systems, our air conditioning systems, our cooling systems, all that can be controlled from the ECR, from the engine control room. In the engine control room, we have, as you can see, the various operators and stations, and we have always two operators, the operator and the co-operator. So a very similar setup again like the bridge and in the airline industry, two persons always making the decision. There's no single point of failure. Also when we go into port, we need to start up extra engines, we need to start thrusters, we need to get our housing pods in a maneuvering mode. So when the work pressure goes up in the engine room, they also add additional staff into their team to of course divide the tasks, and they also then have an operations director that is making sure that nobody gets overloaded, and if they do, add more people to it, so that of course the workload goes down again for everybody. So in the engine control room we also have the controls for the azipod, so for our main propulsion units. If it doesn't work up on the bridge, then we go back to the old style telegraphs. We just say we want half ahead on the port side azipod, and in the engine room they answer that with half ahead, and they will give us the revolutions that we need. So that is still the backup. There's another backup. If this doesn't work, it can go into the azipod room itself. So then from there we can even operate the azipod and give the revolutions that we need to go from A to B. And this is one of our diesel generator sets. We have 6 of them. We have 4 V12s and we have 2 8-cylinder inline. At any given time, the ship needs one of these engines on to operate, because that is the hotel load, as we call it. That is for the air conditioning, that's for the lights, that's for everything that the ship is a hotel. As soon as we start sailing, we need a second one online. We need more power. So then we can start up our azipods, we can start up the bow thrusters, and now we can start maneuvering, and we can start sailing. So with 2 of these units on, we can sail to about 14 knots. So at this present time, we have 2 units running, and that is enough to get us from Valdez to Sitka. This is the bottom part of the engine. So it's really the crankcase, and it's also the bottom of the engine room. So the red plates is the bottom of the engine room. Below that is only the water tanks, the ballast tanks, and the fuel tanks. You can see also it goes from all the way forward of the ship to all the way aft. This can only be taken in port, because as soon as we start sailing, all the watertight doors are closed so that it's all the different compartments in the engine room, because the engine room is below the waterline. As I said, we have 14 knots. If we go up to 18 knots, we start the third one. With 4 engines, we can go up to 20, 20 and a half, and then the 5th engine brings us up to 22 knots. That's the full speed. So you need more and more engines just to get that 1 knot extra speed. So your fuel consumption goes up dramatically if you increase the speed of the ship. But we have 6, so we have 1 more available. If we switch it on, it doesn't give us any more speed, because our electromotors are maxed out to the speed that they can run at. So you have more electricity available, but the motor just doesn't go faster than we have. The electromotor is already up to full speed. But with that, since we have 6, we can always do our own maintenance. So we can take one out of service for maintenance, and performance maintenance, have it ready to go again and in standby. Maintenance on these engines, they can take up to a day, but if it's a major overhaul, it can take up to a month of overhaul, because we take it completely apart, and it's only the frame. We change pistons, we change liners, we change bearings, you name it. And we can all do that while the ship is in service, because we can take one engine out of service. It also means that we're sailing, if we're now with 3 engines on, and if one of the engines gets a stuck fuel pump, or the bearing is overheating, or the cylinder starts leaking, we can switch that engine off, switch another one on, and we're back up to speed again. This is the top of the engine, the upper part, so you can see that it's a V12, because you see 2 banks of 6 cylinders. And these engines are also turbocharged. They're medium speed, so they run at around 514 RPMs. And that drives the generator, and that then gives the electricity all over the ship. The power that we generate is 11,000 volts. And then obviously it all gets transformed down to lower voltages, so that in the end it's 110 or 220 in your stateroom. Engines run on fuel, And the fuel that we bunker always has some particles and water in it, which we want to take out. So we have centrifuges, so the fuel goes through these centrifuges, it spins around. Water and particles are heavier than the fuel, so they spin to the outside, gets caught, goes down into the sludge tank. And then the sludge tank, when we're in Vancouver, it gets offloaded and discharged ashore to a truck that will go to the proper disposal facilities. So now the fuel that goes into the engine is cleaner. Cleaner fuel going in means cleaner exhaust coming out. So that is one of the big advantages. The other one is if you have cleaner fuel going into your engine, you will have less wear and tear on your engine, so your maintenance program is not affected so much, or you have less maintenance and less failures on the engines. We also make our own water on board. So this is one of the water makers we have, that is a reverse osmosis step. So the seawater gets pushed in here under high pressure, and then the water that comes out is potable water, it's fresh water. The water that stays behind is even saltier than outside, the seawater, and goes back into the ocean. The fresh water, we will treat it with minerals, with chlorine, we put it in our storage tanks, and that is then used for the sinks and for the toilets and for the showers. We also have evaporators, and they work in the end on the exhaust gases of our engines. Because the exhaust gases of engines is extremely hot, it's 400 or 500 degrees Celsius, and that just goes into the environment. So we have an exhaust gas boiler, so water through pipes gets pumped through these funnels where the exhaust gases go through. So these gases heat up the water in those pipes. It gets so hot that those pipes, the water in the pipes starts boiling, becomes steam. So the steam, we bring it back into the engine room again, and that is used for heating. So it goes to the main laundry where we heat our washing machines with the steam that is actually the exhaust gas heat that is gone. We also use it for the hot water in your cabins because it goes in the engine room via heat exchangers, so the cold water goes through those heat exchangers, goes up in the pipes to your cabin, and then of course you have hot water. That's why the person that takes the first shower all the way up top always has to wait a little bit longer for its warm water to come up because it needs to come from the engine room to come up. So the pipe needs to be flushed out with the cold water, then you get the warm water. A lot of times it's me because I'm sitting on the early arrivals. So then you get your hot water. But it is also used, the steam that we have is also used for evaporators. So the steam goes into the evaporator, the seawater goes into the evaporator, so the seawater is heated by the steam. So the seawater now starts to boil. So of course the water, the steam that comes off there, it gets condensated, but that is fresh water because the saltier water goes back into the ocean. The water that condensates, so the condensate we collect it, and that is fresh water. So that again gets treated with minerals and with chlorine, and then we can put it in our storage tanks. If we run on 4 DGs, 4 diesel generator sets, so we do the 20 knots, we make more water than that we use on board of the ship, so our tanks will be filling up. And if you're on an ocean crossing for a week, then you are so full that in the end we're making so much water we have to actually pump our fresh water back overboard again because the tanks are full. On these cruises we have runs like we have now, we have a lower speed, so we still make water, but not sufficient to really keep up with all the demand on board. So that's why we also have a reverse osmosis to of course increase our water production. And that's why also in certain ports you will see that there's a hose connected to the shore, so then we also fill up our tanks with potable water that we load in the different ports. So that's how we keep up with the water consumption on board of the ship. And we make it ourselves. You could also say why not use seawater in the toilets, because that will reduce the water making. If you use seawater, then you need to renew your pipes a lot more often because seawater, salty water is just affecting the piping system a lot more. So then your maintenance costs go up there. So that's a bit about how we operate the ship on the bridge and a bit of technical background with how we sail the ship and go from A to B and how you get your water in your cabin. So I hope you appreciate it, I hope you like it.
Thank you very much, Captain.